Okay, so it's 1 minute past. Look, thank you so much for joining this morning. My name's Mark Tyers. I'm the co-founder of Formation Tech, and I've got with me today our head of technology, Mike Gilroy-Scott. Thank you for joining, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not at all. So today we've got a number of businesses joining us. Some who are already using Teams Voice, a number who aren't. Probably the majority, I'd say, probably aren't. But the core reason we're seeing people moving to Teams Voice is simplicity for user experience and management. There's added benefits to cost reductions, whether you're moving from legacy solution or even some of the systems people adopted, the collaboration voice platforms people adopted during, say, the pandemic or before then. Now, Voice is an ever-evolving platform, so there's new features every month that are coming through, just added in as you turn on your laptop or your phone. But natively, it doesn't always provide the features that either businesses have become used to or the ones that they need for their transformation journey. So today we've got a few topics we're going to cover. Please do message into the to the webinar if you've got a question. We can either answer it as we go, or we can answer it at the end of the webinar. But the key topics we're going to cover are cost reduction and efficiency, so strategies for using Teams as a single communication platform. Then optimizing that, so leveraging the Microsoft ecosystem for maximum efficiency, and then going on to, I think, that the thing that probably most people are here to talk about, which is the advanced features, like contact centers, skills-based routing, CRM integration, core reporting, recording. We've got half an hour. We'll try and cover as much of those things as we can. Any topics that we cover that you have interest in, we can follow up with you on a one-to-one basis. Your account manager will be back in touch. So, Mike, so the first topic, cost reduction and efficiency, a few areas we talk about here, but I think probably looking at efficiency, user experience, management experience. Do you want to perhaps give us a bit of a summary around that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the sort of key things that a lot of IT teams and businesses are looking to do is consolidation of the sort of application sprawl, number of platforms that they're deploying and managing and implementing. So from a kind of cost perspective, why have a tool for your meetings and your video and a separate tool for your voice? So the first sort of point is, you can use Teams for voice calling, your normal PSTN telephone calls. So you can collapse them down into that and maybe lose an additional subscription that you might have. So from that perspective, there's a cost saving. More sort of around the operational side of things, having one platform to manage over two means you might not need a specialist person to look after your phone system, or you don't have to spend money training up a new IT team member on the voice platform as well as your IT system. So giving them a tool which is inherently embedded in their kind of IT workloads, there's some cost efficiencies to be gained there. And also from a sort of user perspective, it's quite important that users can go about their day-to-day in a quick and efficient manner, and giving them one tool to perform their voice calls, their one-to-one calls, and their meetings and webinars, etc. And one tool for that, it just streamlines their day. They become more efficient and hopefully happier employees as a result.
Yeah, I mean, we've often talked about it before, saying it's like a feature rather than an application. The application is already omnipresent in these businesses, and so onboarding, the training is much lower, if at all, and it's very much about how the business process can incorporate into an existing tool as opposed to either managing or introducing a new one. I don't want to dwell on this area too much because there's quite a lot to talk around advanced features, but just going on to the management piece, AD has a part to play in this with how integrates. There's a lot of businesses, a lot of products out there that have integrations into Teams, so they kind of hook into it. Perhaps just very briefly, do you want to cover the values of that piece and how that differs from, say, a 8x8 or Ring type integration one might have?
Yeah, absolutely. So because the Microsoft Teams is built on the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 ecosystem, it's part of your identity or your Azure Active Directory setup. So security in groups and all those sorts of things are native to the experience. So it's part of the way that you configure it. So you're not having to create one thing in one place and then replicate that in another place. For example, having a user in Active Directory and then sync it to another platform in 8x8 or Ring Central or another third-party calling platform. So you've got that. So you're not doing that double-handed management. You're kind of just creating the user once and that's it. You're done. You're not having to figure out how you then make sure it syncs across. And then for your user onboarding and user offboarding, you can really create some efficiency and some streamlining there, and it's just all native, if that makes sense.
So we've run a few of these webinars now, and it's been quite helpful to follow the flow of a call when talking about the features and the functions. And so if we start with where a call hits a voice platform, in this instance Teams, a lot of businesses run IVRs now. And that is a native function, but also it's something that we often see businesses wanting to bring a level of advanced capabilities into. So starting with the native functionality, what can you do? What do we see people using? John, perhaps give a quick summary on that.
Yeah, and this is just to highlight what you can do at general end. We're still having conversations today where people say, oh, can I have an IVR? Can I press one for this, two for that? And absolutely, you can do that natively in Teams. It was one of the features available from day one from the platform. So very much so, you know, multi-level auto attendance. You can have time of day routing, you can create multiple greetings, you can upload your own music and hold, you can upload your own custom greetings, all sorts of things there. So all that feature and functionality exists. It's all configured in the GUI. So call comes in, hits that particular IVR or auto attendant as Microsoft calls it, and then it distributes the call within your organization. So it's very easy and flexible to set up. It does get a bit challenging when you want to create lots of complex multi-led IVRs, just because of the way that Microsoft handles call transfers from one thing to another. It gets a bit sort of cumbersome, is what I would say. So whilst you're configuring it in a GUI, it's kind of menu driven rather than workflow driven, if that makes sense. So if you do have particularly complex IVRs, then you'll probably find it a bit of a challenge to get it just so, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's possibly worth mentioning for our part, formation set, this is kind of where we get involved, isn't it? So it's
That's
about
right.
you know, that configuration. A lot of businesses we work with, given the size of clients we tend to work with, have a lot of in-house capabilities, but also look to lean on our team to do that piece if they're either not comfortable with it or just want to hand it out to a business.
Exactly, yeah. So we'd very much, you know, work with our clients to figure out what it is they're trying to achieve. If it can be done natively in Teams, we'll help them achieve that and, you know, perform the engineering task to get that done for them.
And advanced IVRs, very much more logical flow based. You know, we see a lot of businesses taking this route for that reason, but there's other reasons to it as well. Do you want to perhaps go into the sort of back end bit about how that works and the benefits of perhaps doing that outside the native Teams IVR?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you maybe some situations where you're thinking you need something a bit more, because probably most people think, well, that's all I need. In that case, stick with the Teams. But if you need something extra, for example, you have complex time opening functions. So you have an early hours shift, or you have a lunch shift, or you have team meeting shifts, or if you have, you know, a late finishes on Sundays and not on others, managing that in Teams can be, like I mentioned before, very cumbersome. So being able to create time profiles with another IVR platform within Teams that's also native is a benefit. The other thing is having a graphical workflow. So actually almost like a logic diagram of where the call's going. Because even though you've got that menu-driven system in the Teams admin center, it's very difficult to follow a call and its flow. You're having to kind of logic it out or keep very sort of clear documentation of what you're doing. Whereas if you've got a nice graphical workflow of where the call is going in what situation, then that's useful for other people. You might also want some bit more advanced functionality. So you might want to pop up a record in your CRM, for example. So taking the caller ID of the person calling you and then pop a record on that. Now, that is possible with Teams, but it's very much based on HTTP URL. So your CRM has to be web-based, etc. And it's very static, and that's all you can do. So there's no, after that, that's it. There's no integration past that. So if you need anything more, like creating a task entry or a callback entry, then you won't be able to do that with Teams. Lastly, you might want to do some kind of more parameter-based routing. So taking that information from the caller and going, you know what, I want to route that caller always to the same account manager, or that caller is a VIP, so I want to push them to the front of the queue. All of those sort of things are over and above what you might get natively in Microsoft Teams, and you can very simply achieve that just with a native contact center or advanced call routing tool within Teams.
Yeah. I mean,
it never leaves
IVR,
Teams. Yeah, it never leaves Teams. It is a very native feature, but it's not using the Microsoft one. It's using a tool to do that.
Yeah, and it's worth just going into that a little bit, because the way we talk about advanced features, we're talking about partners that we have within that Microsoft ecosystem that are there and placed alongside the Microsoft partnership program to deliver these functions and features. Do you want to perhaps go into that a little bit, Mike, just for context?
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of early days of Teams, people with contact center tools wanted to plug their contact center or similar into Microsoft, and Microsoft came up with integration levels. The first one was Connect, which was basically a SIP connection into these contact center platforms. Call would come into Teams, it would bounce out to the contact center and then back into Teams. So in order to gain those features from the contact center, but underlying Teams was this API that Microsoft had, which they refer to as their extend certification. And what this means is you're using the native Microsoft APIs to handle the call. So the call comes into Teams, gets dealt with your application within Teams, and then is routed natively in Teams. It never leaves Teams. So it's the call path and everything remains in Teams. It's just being routed and handled with these extend-based contact center or integrated tools.
And it's worth quickly mentioning just around the IVR piece, which we're sort of the topic we're on just now, is the visibility and the logical flows allow for less technical people. Where we've got clients in multi-sites, they might have regional bank holidays, they might have regional certain things, and they want to just decentralize that into a level of control that doesn't require a big centralized management. Just briefly touch on that, Mike.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Mark. Traditionally, management of the Teams interface has been an admin or IT task within that team. So, people who run departments, etc., and they wanted to make a change to that would have to, deal with their IT team to get those things done. And sometimes there would be, things lost in translation in that process, and it might take additional time to get things up and running and working. But, with these other tools, you're able to provide role-based access control to the relevant IVRs, so they can change their opening times, they can change the greetings, they can change the workflow without having to involve the IT team. So make it a business process rather than an IT process to do those sort of things, because very few IT teams want to delegate out the admin center to their staff because it's kind of their domain. They want to keep it protected and for prevent kind of misconfigurations. But it is possible with the simpler interfaces to sort of allow access to the right things to the right people.
So moving on from the IVR, I was talking through the kind of the flow of the call. So it's gone through the IVR. A lot of businesses will have a centralized person that deals with different departments. It might be different offices and would need an attendant console. Now, natively in Teams, you obviously get presence. You get to see all those kind of bits you're used to. Touch upon the native function and why and what one looks at around attendant consoles.
Yeah, so the sort of native call handling in Teams is there, hold, transfer, consult, transfer to voicemail, transfer to an external number, all exists natively in Teams. But it's very much a one call at a time kind of process, and just follows the kind of normal call handling that everyone's kind of used to with the menu bar at the top of Teams. Now, that's great if you're handling, a handful of calls a day, but if you're handling sort of, 100 calls an hour kind of thing, you need something a bit more robust to be able to do that, and you need to be able to see how many calls are on hold. Calls in the queue. You might want to see the list of calls you've got on hold, be able to put notes against them, be able to see their calendar at a glance, be able to see notes like they're on holiday or they're in meetings or they're running a webinar, for example, so don't transfer them. So for that kind of requirement, you need essentially an attendant console, or operator console as it's sometimes known, giving them all these tools. So one-touch transfers and immediate searching of departments, bringing in your own contact records, integrations with your CRM as an example, just giving you that real-time visibility of the number of calls coming in, the ability to handle multiple calls at once, those sorts of tools, for those higher volume things. We're seeing a lot of success with this when you've got distributed offices with essentially a central reception team, if that makes sense. So there may be 20 offices, but they want one main number. So we bring that in and we distribute the call to 20 users across those offices on the single number, and they're handling the calls for the entire business. So that we have a lot of good success stories with using this tool for that.
And it can often be a tool that's needed just in the way business works. So a lot of businesses who've got legacy PBXs will be familiar with having maybe either soft consoles on their desktop or a console on their actual desk. And so that continuity of ways of working is often why it's needed, because the volume of voice is not in all businesses what it used to be. This is why having it all together as a single platform makes a lot of sense. But where we've done those sort of legacy migrations, that's often been a kind of driver for that. It's fair to
Yeah,
say.
and it had been a sticking point, and I think people didn't realize that these sort of tools existed, or if they did exist, they weren't quite living up to the expectations that they had from those other tools that they've been using on the legacy platforms. But I think now that kind of a feature difference has kind of evaporated, and the vast majority of these tools are now on par with those kind of things, so they're able to do that. Did I just see
Yeah,
a
there's a question
question
around
pop up?
Salesforce integration, actually, which we're coming on to CRM integration
Yeah,
right now. So let's jump into that. So
good timing. Thank you.
good time for the question. So I mean, look, it's probably touch upon the Salesforce piece and then maybe talk more generically about how that works, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So if back to this kind of extend integration, and I talked about these APIs for routing and handling calls. When you're bringing a call into Teams, there is when you're using these extend level sort of integrations, you're tapping not just Teams, but the whole Microsoft ecosystem. And there's some very useful tools within that environment, one of which is Power Automate. And Power Automate is the tool for essentially automating processes within the Microsoft ecosystem, including things like connectors into CRM applications, Salesforce being one of those, HubSpot, Dynamics, you name it. There are hundreds of native connectors. And what this allows you to do is to take some information, a trigger like this caller is calling, and then perform automated tasks off the back of that information. So for example, in Salesforce, a call comes in, it's a customer, etc. It can automatically create a contact record within Salesforce that person called. So you get your automatic logging of calls to people or agents or staff within your Salesforce application. There are
Yeah,
also
and
some
and
additional
it's
tasks. Sorry, Mark, just while I'm thinking about
no,
it,
no, no, you can, Mike, you
with
can. Yeah.
Salesforce, I paused because I was thinking which CRM this, depending on the CRM and the connectors capabilities for that platform, you might be able to do things like follow-up tasks, for example, so creating callbacks as part of that inbound call flow. So yeah, there are some more advanced, clever stuff that you can use with this platform. So if the connector and the tools exist for your given CRM, then the world's your oyster what you can configure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Salesforce is a pretty prevalent platform, and
Very
there's a
much so.
good amount of integration done with it. So yeah, no, very much. I hope that's answered that question. Please feel free to reach out for additional information. And you talked earlier about, in fact, you already touched on that sort of prioritizations of calls. The treating sort of certain numbers with certain statuses. There's a question just came in about ServiceNow, which I guess
Yeah.
Again, probably integration.
Yeah.
You mentioned moments ago, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think hopefully there'll be more questions like this because it's quite useful. If you want to know if you can integrate with a particular CRM, the best thing to do is just search for Microsoft Power Automate connectors, and you'll probably get Microsoft webpage where it'll give you a whole list of the connectors in your application. You can very easily just Control F or search for your given CRM. And if there's one there natively, it means you've got that native Power Automate connector. It already exists. So the process of just setting it up is like, what's the connector you're using? I want that one, please, and authenticate it, and away you go. If there's no connector in there, it doesn't mean it won't work and you can't integrate. So we can still call REST APIs, etc. So those sort of things, those old sort of more traditional integrations still exist. They're just not off the shelf, and they're not using low code kind of processes like
But
Power Automate, which is incredibly easy.
Yeah, it's fair to say it's not hugely complex. Generally, what people
Yeah.
want to do with CRM integrations, from logging time of call, number of call, notes of call, wrap ups, and things like that, most CRMs support that on some level with some level of API. So
Yeah.
it's not huge amounts of coding, and we can obviously provide that service if it's not in house, or equally if you have those skills, automate REST. It's something that can also be done in house or in partnership. So it's a fairly well trodden path. I hope that answered that question. So yeah, so we've touched upon the sort of prioritization. Adaptive cards, whilst on the subject of Power Automate, is quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
About the purpose and function for those, because it kind of ties in with this quite nicely. Do you want to perhaps touch on that, Mike?
Yeah, adaptive cards, for those who aren't kind of aware of what they are, they're essentially messages within Teams that allow you to perform an interaction. And I think anyone who's used the approvals process within Teams will know what an adaptive card is. It's essentially, it pops up and says, do you want to, you click some buttons, so approval, not approval, and then put a note in. So that's essentially an adaptive card. And those things can be customized to perform a particular task. So an example of using adaptive cards in this kind of scenario using Power Automate is, if, let's say, you miss a call, right? You didn't get to it. You can send an adaptive card to a person, a group, a team, a channel, and it's like, you missed the call to this number. Do you want to call it back? And you go, yes. And then that'll just generate a call for you to call that person back, or any other kind of thing that you want and a task you want to do. If it's possible in Power Automate, you can achieve that. So you just need a trigger and then an action from those adaptive cards. So, there are endless kind of ways to which you can configure that, but getting the platform and the tools in place to allow you to do that, you can really make that process really very useful indeed.
And we've seen some really interesting use cases around that with certain key SLA-driven functions within businesses, where they simply have to know that if a first person misses something, it gets a message out, it alerts it, and it's the out of hours type thing. And various scenarios, every business has that sort of need somewhere. And it's some really interesting cases. There's a question coming on call recording, which interesting is also a subject where I know
It's like they've watched these webinar series before, Mark. It's like they know what's coming.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. So it's around, is it for the whole company or can be done on an individual basis? And we'll answer that in a second, because there's a natural kind of probably point we're going to come on to call recording just in a moment. Yes, so reporting is the next topic as well, which is another question that's come in. So we talked broadly about contact center now. A lot of people think about contact center as obviously being a big, very mature, very grown up way of routing calls, and it can be in Teams, and there can be ways of doing that with a lot of the function we talked about, skills-based routing, prioritizations, etc. But for a lot of people, actually contact center is reporting. It's about what is going on in the business. It is more simplified call flows, which we've already talked about in IVRs. That kind of mimic and replicate a lot of what people think about as being contact center. So two questions come in, actually do very naturally fit in with what we are about to talk about, call reporting and call recording. So perhaps if we touch on call reporting, what you get natively, what people use it for, and what we're doing, and then we'll perhaps come and answer the call recording question after that. We've got about 7 minutes of the webinar left here.
Yeah, so there's a lot to go through, so I'll try and kind of keep it concise. But teams and managers just need data and information about how their team's performing. We're in this sort of hybrid work environment. It's quite hard to see who's making and taking calls these days, and quite often people just want to know, I just want to know who's answering all the calls, or who's not answering the calls, or who's making the most calls. And from that perspective, you just want to quickly be able to see that information. Now, this information exists, and again, because it's Microsoft, it very much lives in the Teams admin center, so it might be an IT task to export that information, and then when it arrives, it's in a horrible big CSV file, which you've then got to manipulate and filter to get the information you like. But the good news is there are some very simple logging tools that just tap into the Microsoft ecosystem using the Graph API, putting that into a platform, sorting it, and giving you the ability to create dashboards, to run scheduled reports. Just have a look at the calls and see who's performing and not performing. And that key one about who's answering my calls or who's not answering calls is very, very easy to achieve, and it's also incredibly low cost as well. This isn't a big kind of contact center application. It's just call accounting and reporting. These sort of tools exist. It's very easy to onboard, and you can get all this very rich information that you've got it at your fingertips, rather than having to go looking for it in the Microsoft native ecosystem.
And businesses who relied on that data historically have bought call loggers. It is effectively a call logger.
The call logger.
And it will record the voice, it will record the Teams, and it's a good all-round solution. I'm just reading a couple of questions coming in. So in fact, the question I didn't put to you actually, Mike, was around call listening, call barging. Now that in the ecosystem has been something you can do through the contact center functionality, and it has been quite an expensive tag-on feature in the scheme of what it actually delivers. But nonetheless, there's a lot of that is also a function that's coming more natively to Teams, I believe.
That's right. So before, if you wanted to sort of listen in or join a call, it's sort of, you would escalate to a conference and then mute out, which is very kind of shoehorning that capability just using the native Teams features. But as you say, contact center providers are the ones who use the Extend Contact Center, have the APIs to listen, whisper and intrude on calls. So this is a very common practice for people who run, sales and training organizations and customer service. From that perspective, it's quite a common use case in traditional PBX or contact center. So you can do it, but non-natively, if that's made sense, but using a contact center tool. You alluded to it coming natively to Teams. At Ignite, Microsoft announced the Queues app, which a lot of people have been asking for, and this is providing that more real-time visibility in terms of calls that are coming into your Teams call queues, because it's like a black box when you get a call. Teams just start ringing, but you don't know how many calls are waiting, how many calls are in the queue. So Microsoft saw that and they were like, okay, we're going to introduce this new application, which you can add into the sidebar of Teams, and it'll give you more of that rich information that's available to you. There is a price, however. Everyone in that team has to buy the Teams premium license, which is about an $8 uplift on the standard Teams phone license.
Which is about £6.
Which is about £6, give or take. So yeah, it's essentially doubling the cost of kind of that capability. But Teams Premium includes a wealth of other features, including Meeting Recap, which is an incredibly powerful tool for meetings. So you're not just paying for that one feature, but it's including this Teams call queuing app. Within that, and later on in the year, Microsoft are going to include the ability to do that listen, whisper, and intrude kind of capability. It won't be a day one release. It's due late this summer in public preview, I believe. But it's a welcome thing that being able to do that more contact center functionality is sort of trickling down to the native teams. But unfortunately, at a cost, you have to upgrade to the premium license.
But your point around, it's slightly off topic for today, but the premium license and meeting summaries is hugely valuable for getting actions, getting meeting notes, understanding what topics are coming from meetings. So it is more than just that single thing. So it's well worth looking at, and it's something we use as a business, like throughout the whole company, from project management through to sales, because it really helps manage what's going on each day. Call recording, Mike. We have 3 minutes left. We can continue on a little bit beyond the half hour if we need to. But call recording. The question was, is it singular? Is it the whole company? Can it be selective? It's quite a big topic, call recording, but John will perhaps give a high level on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So within Teams, the sort of native call recording is, hopefully everyone will be familiar of being in a call or a meeting and being able to record that natively within the platform. But it's a very manual rather than automatic process, which is all very good, but it doesn't really work with phone calls. So you need to sort of plug in a compliance-based call recording platform to make that work with Microsoft. And I think Microsoft lists about 13 or 14 vendors who support this. We have our preference. We went out to the market to find the best ones and the most cost effective. So we will always recommend what we think works. Back to the point about, is it everyone or selective? It's very much user based. What that means is you're setting it up for a user, and generally it will record that user's calls. Now, because it's a Teams call recorder, it's going to record your voice, your video, and your meetings and your screen-based sharing, depending on which platform you've bought. So it's not just it's recording my voice calls. Now, there are ways to achieve that, but there are some caveats around it. So if you're considering doing call recording, it's best to consult with people who understand what the exact requirement is, and then select the tool that works best for your particular requirements. But short answer is no, it doesn't have to be the whole company. But yes, it is user based, and there's caveats because it's not. Teams is obviously doing lots of calling aside from just telephony calls.
Okay, so a question here on the 2 questions actually. One is compliant recording. I mean, obviously, I think they're all compliant, but people are use them for different purposes, don't they?
Anything that's certified with Microsoft will be compliant based. So, your GDPR, your HIPAA, your, other MIFID, etc., FEA, etc. Those kind of compliance. So encrypted, in transit and storage, all of those tools are available for all of those certified platforms. There are some non-certified recording platforms as well. Doesn't mean they're not compliant, but it just means Microsoft has only certified about 14 of them at the moment. So it's an ever-growing list. There are plenty of vendors out there. We recommend always going with certified, because if there's any issues with recording, you've got the support support of Microsoft as well as the vendor for making sure that works.
And the question on text to speak, by the way, we're at half an hour. We're very happy to continue, but anyone who's set their half an hour, thank you for joining. But we'll continue on, and your account manager also reach out for any additional questions you have. But we've got a few questions to answer. Very happy to continue just answering a few of those. So the text to speech, Mike.
Yeah, just on, is that a recording? Do you mean transcription of the recordings? Is that what you meant? So with Microsoft, when you record a call, like this call, for example, you can output a transcription from it. A lot of the recording vendors will offer a transcription service as well. It's usually a bolt-on. I don't think anyone includes it, etc. Recording announcements, thank you. So yeah, if you're setting up IVRs and you want to just type the message in and have the Microsoft text-to-speech engine read that out, then yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Yeah,
and I think
that's a native Teams feature. Yeah.
That possibly caters for the question we haven't yet addressed, which is there an announcement function where notification is currently set to send via Tannoy, for example?
So is this, something happens, you want to trigger an announcement on an IVR with a PA system potentially? Maybe, don't know. Sorry, I didn't read
evacuation, for example.
So it's an announcement function where the notification is currently sent via okay.
So can you go
I like questions. I like questions like this. The short answer is no kind of native thing, but you can be a bit clever with you can integrate things like Tannoys and PA systems and other things into Teams. But you do need a bit, usually need bits of on-prem kit to facilitate that. So
you think about the logical, you think about the logical if and or flow of an IVR in certain scenarios. It's one to take away. It's a question to take away. So let's see what we can answer about that and look at that as an example.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that sandwich van arrived. What a lot of people use is just a paging system for handsets. Interestingly, it's supported on Teams, but it's through the handset vendors. So they have a paging function within the phone itself, but you have to set up the paging group within the, the vendor's ecosystem, and then use that functionality to sort of auto page out the handsets. But from Teams' perspective, there's no kind of auto speakerphone thing, if that makes sense. But it can be done, but you have to use the vendor's capability to do that rather than Teams. Yeah.
One to check to our tech team to come up with some ideas on how that might be achieved. I'm sure
there may be other ways of doing that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe people just have a group chat, and I think that's what more commonly used these days. And say the sandwich van is here, and it pops up on everyone's Teams, rather than actually having an audible announcement. But there you go.
Good. Well, look, we covered a lot of things there. I think that we were looking to cover cost and efficiencies, onboarding, system integration, contact center reporting, call recording. We've covered a bit now, and it's a very big topic, isn't it? We talk for a great deal of time about this, and I think we often like to finish these sort of webinars in a more general kind of what's coming, what's interesting, what's down the line. AI is always a topic of conversation. So Mike, what have you got for everyone here today? What things are coming that are of interest that you think would be something to talk about today?
Yeah, and before anyone groans, I am going to talk about Copilot, but not the Copilot that you probably be familiar with, but it's just the sort of personal assistant Copilot. The next sort of step from Microsoft is that it's the next sort of transition from this is, rather than Copilot write me this, Copilot do this for me, etc. It's the concept of a team Copilot. So rather than it being a personal assistant, it becomes a team assistant. So if you set up a team, a channel, a kind of project, you invite all the members from your team to kind of collaborate on that particular task that you're doing, but you also add Copilot as a team member. And what's great about that is if you're using Planner, you can set up tasks for Copilot to achieve. You can also question Copilot on the status of the project, so you can ask it questions. You can also give it tasks, so it becomes your 24/7 assistance for getting stuff done. And I think that's going to be a really great tool for people to just have that automated assistant that can go and do things without you having to be able to get in contact with your team. You can go find this information for me, and it'll come back and tell you. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I think just the bits we talked about really about the premium license on a more simplistic level.
Yeah.
and a few questions on call recording and analysis of various conversations and things. It brings huge efficiency to the way all these systems operate. So look, lots to play for. But look, again, thanks everyone for coming along today. Please do reach out to us. We'll certainly reach out to you to see how you felt today was. We run these at least monthly, sometimes more. We more recently did a security one. It's another area of business we work in, but voice is really where we sort of started as an organization, moving sort of legacy infrastructure to the cloud. Teams has been a big part of that for us, and hopefully if you're on that journey we can help you with it. But if not, I hope it's been useful for whatever you're doing. But thanks for spending your half an hour of your morning with us. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye. And yes, we'll share the video. We'll share that out to you as well. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.